Acceptance is not humility. It is more the preliminary stage to associate a certain system of parameter to allow for dissemination of social experience and participation at the level of the individual. In the case of avoidance to the notion of acceptance, at its most extreme case would be the experience of one's existential deterioration. Not that there is such a thing as true existential deterioration, rather it is the experience of such, for the individual is simply psychologically participating in some of its happenstance, and it is not realized as a deterioration at its fundamental state, for in that case it wouldn't even be possible to be articulating a substance which is no longer there, and as long as it is existent, it is merely the supposition of its deterioration. Besides the point, the importance, or the extreme case in which it is not supposed, would have one experience the deterioration, not because there's anything fundamentally broken with the individual. Rather, the individual becomes part and parcel with their deepest state of experience, which is burdensome and in constant motion of biological disruption, deviation, change, and so on. We might think that an adolescent who is blooming, at least biologically, would not experience the existential deterioration, for it doesn't mirror in any way the person who inhabits that experience. But in the scheme of things, it is all organic matter that moves along a continuum until it is fallen from the grace of beholden to an experience. Because of this, it is possible to gain access to that through loss of the notion of acceptance. And by this, we're already moving away from even the terminology of such a word. It rather encompasses the idea of beholding one's experience to itself. In the usual case, one is taught through the process of growth from infancy to be in a state of acceptance. It is constantly at the deterrence of experience that one grows through requiring nourishment, and so on, and pain and suffering. We assume that a child or an infant accepts that form of suffering as though it were an ensemble to creation, but it is rather a learning process, which upon the state of adulthood is fully intuitive to a point where it need not be returned unless the change of circumstances of a detrimental state, in which one will learn the process of de-acceptance, or the initial state of humanity in which there is no such thing as acceptance. In this way, one does gain access to the existential modality of their being, which has its purposes. For instance, one has gained an analysis of depth in which they're not avoidant to the true nature of experience. This is very much the detriment of overly accepting reality. We could imagine a war scenario or a catastrophe in which the society simply agrees that this is the way it is and it will always be like this. For in that case, the subtleties are completely lost, and the sensitivity to being and to the notion of the process of being is all limited and fallen from the grace of the subjective experience, although objective humanity can gain access to their empathetic strands, but not through the individual itself, but rather as an external study. The point of the matter is that the notion of acceptance is, by all accounts, a balancing act between both the extreme of existential experience at a point where one does not even have the ability to inhabit any sort of premise, for everything is burdensome, and the movement of a limb is as if it would be gears moving along without any oil to lubricate the movement. It's rusty in every sequence. Or in the other case, in which the acceptance is of strong measure, and that even the most extreme experiences of humanity are lost to their purview and are rather supposed as though they were external to them and articulated to the external world that it is somehow being experienced, when it is rather the case that they are lost to the substrands of that experience, irrespective of in how it is responded by the external realm. We could see this notion arriving at the case where one has lost those strands, but then demands of a society or group to participate and offer those empathetic glances that now allow them to be validated in the experience for which they have no validation, almost to offer them humanity in the case where they've lost that sensibility. With all this accounted for, the expression of that form of acceptance is through the bearing of recognition that there is a detrimental effect or a dramatic effect in any direction. In the case of any movement, it will cause the ability of ascertaining the information in that realm or in a social experience or any such perceptual process, so that the limitations are dramatic.